Glad to see that you're back. Here's the eighth point of evidence. Grammar, the way of organizing thought. Here is something that is amazing about language, and I like to have the kids write down I, meaning they, each one of them. I mastered English grammar by about age 4. And some of them might feel like, well, that's a lie. I don't want to write that down. I got a D in English class in 7th grade. It makes no difference. The students mastered English grammar by about age 4. If they hadn't, they couldn't have spoken English. Whether or not they can write it, or less likely yet, that they can explain what they figured out, that's a whole other matter. And that's what a typical class in 7th or 8th grade grammar might be, explaining what they figured out. But they mastered it. Now, how they did that, scientists aren't sure. I think they believe now, it's pretty standard, that they think that a human baby is born hardwired, if you will, ready to learn a language. And it will learn the language that it's surrounded by. If you have a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, a WASP as they're called, somebody like me, born in China and raised in a Chinese town, well, that kid would speak perfect Chinese, It has nothing to do with race. It has to do with the environment. But the baby seems to be ready to learn a language. Baby talk appears to be universal worldwide for a brief time, but then it begins to sort out into those phonemes and those morphemes in that grammar. Well, it's amazing. Well, that's pretty amazing. But also amazing is that apparently, if I hadn't, again, I'm asking the kids to write it down from their experience, if I hadn't IBID, well, IBID means same as above, if I hadn't mastered English grammar, well, if a German is watching, it would have been German grammar or Portuguese grammar or Chinese grammar, but some grammar. If I hadn't mastered some grammar by about age 4, I never could have mastered any. That seems to be the evidence. You've got a window. I think linguists call it the critical period. There's a window of opportunity when a human baby can learn a language. And that window can close. So after 4, maybe 5 years, if a human baby has not learned a language, the evidence is that they never will. In a way, it's not right to say it this way, but in a way, it's like saying that as a baby, you could do something you couldn't do now as an adult. Well, I guess that's sort of true. Now, as an adult, once you've mastered 1, you can go on to master 2 or 3 or 4. I've mastered, besides English, I've mastered 4 other languages. But you've got to get that first one, and you've only got a certain amount of time to do it. Well, why do scientists think that? There was a nickname for this, the forbidden experiment. If you could take a baby and not let that baby ever hear human speech until the baby was 5 or 6 years old, and then see what happened, well, you could do this scientifically, prove it, but it would ruin some human's life. So it was called the forbidden experiment. But there have been instances historically where children have miraculously survived an infancy where they did not have normal human contact. And so they reached a certain age and they did not have language. They have been studied to see, well, can they now learn language? A nickname for them is wild children. If you want to look at this is a very interesting subject. Well, all of linguistics is, but if you go on Wikipedia and look up feral child, you can read a whole bunch about this. What I like to do in class is talk about a girl that was given the name Jeannie. She was an American girl in Los Angeles. And a boy who was given the name Victor, who was a French boy around the year 1800. This was 1970 or something like that. Well, Nova, a documentary series, did one called Secrets of the Wild Child, and I would put it on. As a matter of fact, that's your assignment for tomorrow. Find that. It should be easy. It's on YouTube. I never show the kids the whole thing. It's disturbing. But I like to show them at least the beginning about Jeannie and about Victor. That will go on to say about, I don't know if I've got this spelled right, François Truffaut, L'Enfant Sauvage. He did a black and white movie about Victor, the infant savage, the savage child. It's a very interesting subject, but heartrending because of those children. And I think I'll just leave that for you to go find. But in any case, the evidence seems to be that they could not be taught. Now, this is in spite of all kinds of fiction, like the Romulus and Remus, the twins raised by wolves, Mowgli from the Jungle Book, supposedly raised in the wild. I think Tarzan raised in the wild. There was a movie called Walk Like a Man, I think, and a real funny movie, Australian movie called Human Nature, I think it was called, that dabbles with this idea. Oh, and one other thing I'd like to point out about Victor, if you go see it, that was in the year 1800. And around the year 1800, the Romantic period, which later on in the chronological survey, I'll tell you about the Romantics. Well, the Romantics had this idea that there existed a noble savage, the noble savage. I'll teach this to you later. And Victor should have been the noble savage. But there was a lot about the Romantics that was just absolutely absurd, even though I profoundly respect the Romantics and the influence that they've had on us all. But anyway, if you go to this, and I ask you to, I keep coming back around to this, if you don't take notes for my class, and if you don't find these videos, well, you're not really completely taking the class. All right, I've got a little bit more to show you to try to convince you that language is amazing, but that should be enough for today.